Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Radical Democracy Show. I'm your co-host, Kamali Rose.
And I'm Kwame Norval.
And we are joined today by two of our comrades from the Fred Hampton Leftists. We've got James Fauntelroy, also known as Jaybefaunt on Twitter, in the building with us. Welcome to the show, James. Appreciate you coming on. And we also have RJ here with us as well. And RJ, nice. And we have RJ is the host of Revolutionary Jargon on Fred Hampton Leftists, and James hosts the JB show on Fred Hampton Leftists. So we're going to be talking today. We've got a few topics we want to get through. We want to first thing I wanted to do is just in support of right now, we know the events that are occurring. If you watch the show, you know what's going on right now with the Israel's fascist ethnic cleansing of Palestinians in Gaza and Jerusalem, and so the Palestinian people have enacted a general strike from they all across Israel and Gaza, and so I just wanted to start off the top by just saying that we are in solidarity with that, and here at the Radical Democracy Show, and I know that everyone here I follow all James and RJ, and I've seen their coverage, and just want to shout y'all out for the work that y'all are doing, and really appreciate this is the kind of stuff that we have to make sure that we are lending our voices to as Americans, and because of our government's complicity and support and active role that they play in this in this genocide. So thank y'all so much for coming on here today, and in a time like this. So let's get things going. First off, I wanted to just ask y'all, can you tell us a little bit about and maybe James, you can start us off, maybe just tell us, what is the Fred Hampton Leftists?
Thanks for having me on. This is wonderful to be here. The Fred Hampton Leftists is a group of leftists, some of us socialists, some of us are communists. And what our purpose is to not only be an educator about leftist policies, but to show leftist policies and to advocate for them from a Black leftist perspective, as well as to take the information that we receive from around the world and let people know what it is in an accurate form, and also to show how people in the world deserve much better than what they're getting, especially people within this country.
Great, thanks.
So it's pretty much a education partially program that we have, in order to let people know that you don't have to accept crumbs. You can actually get a slice of pie out of the pie, basically.
Makes sense. And maybe you can take this one, RJ. Like, what led y'all? Like, what is it? How did y'all start this? When and how did y'all start this? And really, why Fred Hampton? Why that name? Why Fred Hampton Leftist?
So how this all originated it started with three people. It started with Nick, it started with Rome, and it started with CJ. They got together. They wanted to organize a leftist media organization, which has tons of Black leftists to talk about whether it's theory, things that are in practice, protests, political education. And then they added me and JB and Jackie on to really bring different types of perspectives, because all six of us have really different political ideologies and also different political backgrounds. Like, none of us are in the same geographics in terms of the United States. We have JB from Florida. We have Jackie and CJ from California. Me and Rome are from Michigan. So and Nick is from Kansas. So we're all spread around the different type of country. We have really the Southerners, Midwesterners, the coastal people. So I think that type of geographical and political differences, bringing us together as Black leftists, can really help us reach different people in a way that probably normal lefty political talk shows don't. And in terms,
hold on. I thought that I was told that Black people are a monolith, in that we all live in, big cities, urban big cities, and we're a complete monolith. So what is this? What is this you're telling me about having differing political views amongst Black people? I thought that we were all liberals. That's the line I've been fed by our corporate media for a long time.
Oh yeah, I mean that's something that they told us all the time. Even Joe Biden said during the presidential campaign that the Latin American people, they're more diverse than Black people. Black people are homogenous. So that's
Black. If you don't vote for Joe Biden, you ain't Black. So I mean, who did either of y'all vote for Joe Biden? Can you affirm your Blackness today for us?
No, I did not vote for Joe Biden, so I guess I'm not Black.
I don't think. Yeah,
our Black cards have been revoked, gentlemen.
Yeah. I'm damn near clear.
So why Fred Hampton, RJ? Why do you invoke Fred Hampton in the name of the organization?
Fred Hampton was someone that's really an inspiration of all of ours, and someone who is a gigantic figure in the Black community itself. I mean, this is a man who spoke about political theory. This is a man who did tons of organizing. This is a man who fed and clothed his community. And so those are the three ideologies that we're trying to do with our network. Rome is on the ground organizing. I'm doing political education. Nick, CJ, JB, they do all types of organizing, political education as well. And that's something that we want to envision by all of us taking those parts that Fred Hampton did and combining our talents together. Because I think it's really hard to try to do everything Fred Hampton did in his short time in his life individually, because it is such a hard, what you would say, something to live up to. So that's why it takes all of us to come together to talk about those different type of scenarios. So our vision right now for Fred Hampton Leftists is to really come together and talk about Black issues in a way from a Black leftist perspective, and really tell people who could be apolitical or even sometimes leftists themselves that we could say, hey, yes, this is something that's quoted in theory or as well, but here's how it affects the Black community. And America itself has a problem with race and with class as well. So we talk about those different dynamics and how we can really help the left understand America itself is really a special evil, even though you'd agree with theory. So that's kind of what we're about.
Oh, yeah.
Can I add something to what RJ
Please.
just said? Another reason for us forming this is because, Nick actually had an interview with Dr. Cornel West earlier today, and he actually spoke about wanting to pull the Black community back to the left. And one of the things that we need to do is we have a rich history, a lineage of Black leftists who, especially during the civil rights era, were out there anti-war, pro-worker, pro-union, making sure that people not only, were being taken care of as far as our civil rights, but it's also as far as our economic rights as well. And so, unfortunately, because of the system that we live in right now, we have a lot of Black capitalists. We also have a lot of Black leaders. And I put that in air quotations because they have deviated from the lineage that we have had that has tried to usher us into a point where we can have our material conditions met. So what we're doing now is trying to remind the Black community. We're reminding our elderly Black folk of what they used to be, but we're also telling the story and encouraging our younger Black folk, those who are, teenagers, RJ's age. I just dated myself. And those of us who are a little bit older.
Yeah.
That, look, this is what we were, this is what worked, and this is where we're going. And this is part of the reason why we also chose the name Fred Hampton, because that's what he was doing. And I also add, Fred Hampton, when he died, was the same age as RJ.
Yeah.
So that gives you, the scope of, how wonderful Fred Hampton was, but it also influenced like people like my co-host right here, like RJ, to be able to be a political, a historical educator on things so that we can move back to the left where we're supposed to be.
So yeah, and you know, it was, I think, Cornel West who actually said in this lecture that he was giving about on his series on W.E.B. Du Bois. And he talked about a black monolith, in fact, and about how one of the things that they try to do is they try to, you know, the liberal, you know, white liberals and the white, you know, liberal media will try to create this concept of like a black leader, and there's always just one black leader at a time, because then they can pigeonhole every person into that and also try to shape the narrative around that person. So somebody like Martin Luther King, you know, they'll put him up there and then they'll shape the narrative around him where he's not a socialist like he was, you know, not fighting on these like anti-poverty campaigns, but really he's just focused on just you know, just about black stuff, pretty much, you know, and that has nothing to do with, you know, with all these, you know, with all money or anything like that. You know, he didn't fuss about anything like that. He didn't talk about, you know, anti-war U.S. imperialism, and so it's a tool that they have in trying to, you know, diminish what the rich, you know, rich tradition, like you said, of black history. And I think that it's something that we all, I mean, even somebody like Fred Hampton, right? I didn't know who Fred Hampton was till I was probably 30 years old. I grew up in American education. I went through all, you know, all the schools here. I graduated college. You can be considered a smart person in America and graduate college and not know who the hell Fred Hampton even is. And that's a travesty, because you know, he plays such an important, critical, you know, role in the development of the sort of, you know, black left ideology. And like you said, he did it all before 22 years of age, when he was assassinated by, you know, Chicago police and the FBI. And we, you know, now folks are finally, you know, they made that movie, and, you know, hopefully a few more people will know who he is through that. But yeah, so I think it's great what y'all are doing there. And what you know, before we move on, where would y'all like to see, you know, either y'all, where would you like to see this go? Like, what do y'all hope to? Do you want to, you know, are you hoping to create essentially, it seems like y'all have a media platform going here, you know, like in its early stages, really.
So I can tell you from what I'm doing on my show, because I can't really speak for everyone currently, but on my show, what I do is I bring on journalists, I bring on writers. Specifically, I did a show breaking down what anarchism is. One of my friends, EQ, he writes Substack articles. We cover some articles on my show. So I'm really diving into the political education sphere. So those who are curious about different factions of leftism and you want to learn about it domestically or internationally, you should really check out my show, and that's what I'm doing. Overall, I believe everyone really is, what we're focused on right now is the political education side. But if we get big enough, we do want to actually work on organizing with our own communities. And I think Rome, what he's doing right now is very great, and he's going to be teaching us pretty soon how to do that moving forward.
So yeah, so maybe, you know, if we have some time at the end, you know, hopefully we'll circle back around to this, and you know, because I you know, I love to talk more about this. So you know, let's you know, let's jump into a bit of our core discussion here. You know, really, I wanted us to sort of talk about and start to get an idea of what it is that we sort of, you know, recently, I mean, Joe Biden is, you know, President Joe Biden, he essentially promised during his campaign that nothing would fundamentally change if he became president. And so far, it seems he's been 100% correct about that. And, you know, we've seen the failure of the Democratic Party, which controls the White House and both chambers of Congress right now. They have, you know, failed in their, you know, they continue to support and refuse to end U.S. support for Israel's, again, fascist ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. They fail to provide universal health care in the midst of a pandemic that has seen well over 500,000 Americans die in a year. At the same time, other countries like communist China have been able to, you know, keep their debts below any of our, you know, any of our largest single one-day totals. And they have 4 times the population of the United States. They have failed. The Democratic Party has failed to increase the minimum wage above a starvation wage of $7.25 an hour in the midst of an economic recession, possibly depression, unlike anything we've experienced in the past 100 years, certainly not in our lifetimes. So we're facing 2 overlapping, you know, crises at this moment, plus the overlapping existential crisis of climate change as well. The ICC issued a report just a few years ago under Donald Trump. They issued a report in 2017 that said that we had 10 years to act on climate change in a substantive way, lest we reach a tipping point where we reach the point of no return, essentially. So if, given all of these, overlapping situations here and the inability of the Democratic Party to meet the moment, do you believe that this is that, for one, let's just start with, what do you believe there's any hope left in electoral politics for us? And maybe you can start things off, Jaybefaunt.
No.
That's as fair as you can get right there.
Look. Okay, so like for instance, one of the things you said, and I'm gonna push back a little bit. You said that the Democratic Party failed to pass things like universal health care. They failed to, keep, tabs on the COVID-19 deaths, on Israel and Palestine. They didn't fail. They just didn't want to. See, here's the thing. The Democrats could have pushed even, the right wing maybe a little bit further to the left when it comes to certain things like COVID-19 protections. They could have gave us $2,000 to stay home. They could have did rent and mortgage moratoriums, not only just for homes, for also for businesses. They could have did so many things, and yet we have over 500,000 deaths. Last time I just checked, in China, to date, they've had over 4,636 deaths from COVID-19 in mainland China. They have almost 4 times as many people as we do, and yet they have a fraction of the deaths. Why is that? Because they actually took it seriously, and they made sure that their people were taken care of and safe. The Democratic Party does not care about us. I don't care who you are. If you are black, you have to recognize that they just want us for optics. That's it.
Yep. And it's funny that you say what you said, because I honestly, when I wrote, when I was thinking through this and writing this all up, I went back and forth about saying, when I said failure, I was like, maybe I need to rephrase that, because it's a failure from our perspective, from the Democratic Party's perspective. This is actually a success. This is what, like you said, James, this is what they believe in, right? So
if a boxer throws a match, did he fail or did he win?
Yep. So that's a great point, I think. So RJ, how do you feel similar about electoral politics, about the prospect, of electoral politics? I mean, we've seen, again, the force the vote movement. We couldn't get even a vote on Medicare for all. We're in the midst of a pandemic. Unable to to raise the minimum wage, given, with essential workers dying at, tragic rates, and putting their lives on the line just to keep us all safe and keep our country running in a way that we can all get the food and goods and services that we absolutely, need. Do you feel like there is, do you see hope in electoral politics?
Me personally, currently, I don't really see hope in electoral politics, because I think the problem, especially with the politicians like the Squad, AOC, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, is they're listening to Ayanna Pressley, who herself really isn't that progressive. And she's basically
from our district. Like, we grew up in Ayanna Pressley district, so I can tell you exactly. She is not. She spoke out against Medicare for all. There's a great clip of her, saying it's a pipe dream. You're never gonna get this. So you're 100% correct there.
And so Cori Bush she's basically the auntie. Ayanna Pressley's basically Cori Bush's auntie. And the problem that I see with the progressives, especially those who are in Congress, is that they start off as, socialists, they say, and then they move to the right and be social Dems. And so now what I see in leftist political discourse is social Dems are now controlling really the window of leftism. And so now that they're deemed, that's the far left in terms of Congress, while there's people even to the left of them that's like a socialist or an anarcho-communist, now that's too far left. And so I think that's the problem. We need to actually elect hardcore socialists and communists. But I do believe that the electoral, that strategy could be put into place. But the problem I see now is that the left really doesn't have any trust in terms of who's running to actually be for what they are for, because people have invested tons of money organized a lot of their time for Cori Bush, AOC. You could name any progressive that ran as a progressive and got elected. And what do? Right when it's a prime opportunity to use their power, like the COVID relief bills back in 2020, even the ones under Joe Biden with the budget reconciliation, they're must-pass bills, meaning they can't be killed. It just goes back to the Senate, they reconvene, it comes back up to the House. So what we're saying is that it also goes back to your question about forced to vote in general. Forced to vote, yes, it started off as, hey, let's let's use the squad as our proxies to force Nancy Pelosi to give us health care. But then later on, it changed to saying, hey, let's not sell ourselves short here. We can do anything we fucking want to. We can basically throw the entire bus at them and say, if you don't at least give us what's in our top 25 issues, we're not going to for you. But the problem is that the squad tried to pull the okie doke, meaning that the first vote, they voted no, or they abstained. Yep. And then the second vote, they all voted for. So they tried to pull the centrist move, and that's such a Democrat thing to do. That's what pisses everyone off. And so I think in general, electoral politics is kind of dead right now. We kind of have to we have to stop giving them money, and we have to really organize for ourselves and to put pressure on really all the politicians. That's why I tell people too, yes, I had sympathy for you. I supported some squad members, but at the end of the day, they're politicians. They're going to look out for what's in their best interests. So we really have to work together and organize amongst ourselves. And you can be an organizer, you can be a political educator, you can just, so do whatever you want to do as a leftist to provide for the movement. And so I also disagree with, some leftists that say, hey, we have to do it this way. How about we all do it in our own way and then come together what's best for the movement? So I think that's what we should be able to do. And long tangent short, I don't think that electoral politics in this particular instance isn't going to work, because now that Uncle Joe is in office, we're supposed to just lay down and let him do it. But when it was under Trump, it was so easy because it's the evil fascist dictator. So I think we're kind of screwed right now, mostly because if you look at modern political history, the only time under a Democratic president in which a Democratic president gains seats in the House and the Senate, it only happened 2 times in the last 100 years. Franklin Roosevelt and John F. Kennedy. Every other Democratic president has lost seats in both houses. And we know Clinton, 94 midterms, lost, got creamed. Okay, look at Obama. After 2008, 2010 came, got shellacked. So this is what Democrats do. They sell you the moon, and then they fuck you over and sell you out. Okay, and then there's a depression, and then they fucking blame you for not voting for them. So that's why I think it's dead in this instance, because even apolitical people and mainline Democrats, they see through the bullshit. They just hate Trump so much. And that's why the Democrats love Donald Trump. They don't have to fucking do anything. They can just bring him out there and say, oh, the boogeyman is out here, and you keep them in line. While the rest leftists, we hate Joe Biden because he does the exact same shit as Trump, but they bullshit us in thinking he doesn't.
Yeah, so some of us are old enough to remember George Bush and how they said the same stuff about George Bush, essentially. And now we got Ellen dancing on stage with him. Like how long before they're all dancing with Trump and they're laughing and yucking it up with him again, because these people all seem to roll in the same circles anyways. You saw Trump running against Hillary Clinton, but then talking about how, they're corrupt because, he gives her money, and then when he wants her to come to his wedding, she shows up at his wedding, and it's just like these people are all, they all want to hang out together, and they're all friendly, and they bump elbows together. And I think, to be honest, that's part of what ends up happening, and why I think it's at this point I consider it impossible to change the Democratic Party. I believe the Democratic Party changes you. You don't change the Democratic Party, because it is a machine. It is a system at this point. And what seems to me to be happening with the folks, the AOCs, the Ilhan Omars of the world that you mentioned, RJ, is like they get in there and then they start to see every day more and more. They look at the Nancy Pelosi's and the Joe Manchins and see them as their colleagues. And, oh, he's a nice guy and he's friendly, and you see him in the hallways and he doesn't call you the N-word and, lynch you. So I guess that they're not so bad after all, and maybe we can work with them. And honestly, I think that they've convinced themselves that they're better off staying in that position, and even if it means always doing the safest thing and never, for themselves safe, not safe for the people that are homeless, not safe for the people that are, on the edge of eviction right now, not safe for the children going hungry, not safe for the people that are dying, the 50,000 people that die every year without health insurance in this country. So not safe for them, but safe for, politically safe for them. because they feel, oh, well, it's better that I'm here, and at least we don't give up the seat to somebody more corporate, and at the expense of being willing to take risks, and like you said, RJ, and James too, not willing to use leverage when they actually have it. And so this is just an ongoing failure of the Democratic Party, it seems. And unfortunately, James, do you see any hope in something like you said no electoral politics, so you don't buy into like the idea of like a third party, a people's party? What are your thoughts on that sort of the strategy? I know that there's a lot of folks on the left that are saying, okay, well, the Democratic Party is done, but we should just then turn all of our energy towards supporting the People's Party now. Do you believe that strategy is a winning strategy?
Let me clean up what I said a little bit earlier. So on Sunday, I interviewed Kshama Sawant. She is a city councilwoman of Seattle. And there was some legislation for the city that she was proposing that would definitely help people, especially in regards to renters' rights. And go ahead and check that show out on the JB show and Fred Hampton Leftists when we talked about. But that type of politics is okay because it means that it's going to result in tangible reforms for people. As far as trying to reform the Democratic Party, no. The reason why is because, like I said before, association brings on assimilation. Mm-hmm. So, therefore, people like AOC, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, Mark Pocan, all of them are now assimilated into the Democratic Party. And so because of that, they don't want to rock the boat. And and people need to take this into consideration. No major movement or shift in people's material conditions has ever happened by means of a politician. Yep. None. Mm-hmm. So therefore, to put all that on a politician is without precedent.
Yeah.
So you go back to, for instance, what happened with FDR, and he passed the New Deal. And I'm sure RJ, as our resident historian, can attest to this. Yeah. Who was the ones that pushed FDR into that direction? It was communist movements, union movements, socialist movements that pushed him into that direction. The same thing that happened with the Civil Rights Act. Who pushed them into that direction? It was the activists that pushed them into that direction. So therefore, it is not going to happen by means of the AOCs or the Ilhan Omars or even the Bernie Sanders. It's not going to happen through them. It's going to happen to the people that push them. That's how it's going to happen. And so to put all of our stock in any party, I don't care who it is, it doesn't matter. What matters is the outside force pushing people in. Now, what I will say is that if you have someone that is somewhat sympathetic to what we want and is willing to, in a proverbial way, open the gates for us or leave it cracked open for us, then yes, okay, then we have those people there. But they're not going to be the ones that are going to get us into the gates. It's going to be us that gets us through the gates. And that's the thing we need to put more focus and stock on.
Yeah. I should say Kshama Sawant is pretty much the last, remaining glimmer of hope. That she's the last thing giving me any hope for electoral politics whatsoever. And like you said, she's doing it from outside of the Democratic Party. She's a member of the Socialist Alternative, which I know that RJ is what's your role there? You are are you a member of the Black Caucus, or are you on the leadership there of the Black Caucus and Socialist Alternative, RJ?
Well, so for full transparency, I attended a couple meetings. So and I've been invited. So I've attended some meetings. I think one member of the Bessemer, Alabama Union Drive, I forgot his name, but he was there testing his story, very prophetic about his organizing. So basically what I know so far is they have different activists, organizers who are Black, and they do have many different discussions about what's happening geographically in their region around the United States. what they're doing to better their communities, and really overall what the left can do. So they have so many great conversations.
That's great. Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's, Kshama Sawant is the one person. I mean, she got a $15 minimum wage passed in Seattle, which essentially set off the series of cascading events that really led to it. It was the first city to enact that $15 minimum wage, and then we've seen the sort of how it's played out from there. So I think, which is a good point, and sometimes I even make the mistake of, sometimes when I think about electoral politics, I get a little too narrowly focused on it and thinking about it as these national politics that we're often so sort of wrapped up in, and when really there is more, you do have more power within, local, is the smaller the government, the more local the government. Of course, the Democratic Party still does a number on those, institutions as well. Here in the state of Massachusetts, Democrats hold 80% of the seats in our legislature, but they did not pass rent control, eviction moratoriums. They struggled with ranked choice voting. We couldn't get so even under, as long as it's the Democratic Party, you still run up against that powerful machine. And so it is going to be a long fight, but I do agree that it's got to be a fight that we have from outside of the Democratic Party at this point, because
and remember, the Democratic Party is a private organization.
Yes, they are not a public entity. Yes.
Yeah, and so they can choose who they want. They even said so in court. So therefore, your choice actually doesn't matter. It's only up to the people who are higher ups in the Democratic Party who actually choose the people that they want.
Yeah, I think they said something like, we could, if we wanted to, choose our candidates in a back, a CD back room with cigars, and they were we could if we wanted to in court. So you speak no lies, James. So okay. So if we're saying that, at least for now, in these moments, the electoral politics, if we sit here, we can sit around and, if we're doing this every 2 years, we get a couple of progressives into Congress, and at the rate that we were going, it would take something like 100 years to get enough of these so-called progressives in there that you actually have a majority. They already have enough of them that they're larger than the gap between the Democrats and the Republicans, meaning they do have enough leverage there. If they understood how to use power, they do have enough leverage to do things like force votes, or what, and then we see the corporate establishment Democrats are always willing to do whatever and hold up their vote when it means something like denying poor working class people any sort of benefits. Folks like Joe Manchin, and they play this little fun game, the establishment, it seems to me, where they rotated in and out who's going to be the fall guy each time. It's like Mark Kelly's now the fall guy for the PRO Act. They'll find another one every single time. And if there's two progressives that are willing to hold their vote, they'll just get 3 establishment Democrats to come out there and to play the same game and to play hardball, and they'll continue to play this game and sort of hold the left at bay. So given the struggles that we're having, the inefficacy of electoral politics, what do you think are what types of organization? What are the other, what should we be focused on the left in this moment? What should we be spending our time on? Maybe you can start there, RJ.
Yeah, I think that what we could really be starting on is bringing back unions. Actually pushing for unionization in workplaces as well as worker co-ops. I'm an anarcho-syndicalist, so for me, I believe the best way to bring about communism and socialism is really doing it through the workplace and really taking over the capitalistic machine from the inside. That's kind of my ideology, but you can't do that when unions in America is only 7% of the entire workforce in America. So that makes it kind of difficult. So I believe we should, and JB kind of mentioned it before, how what happened in the 1930s during the Great Depression, workers wanted a 40-hour work week. They wanted a minimum wage. They wanted all these different types of benefits. But what do? Oh, yeah, the Union Party. Oh, yeah, the Labor Party. So actually bringing those back and rebuilding those up. But we have to do that through mutual aid. We have to actually enforce our power using general strikes. And so I think those old school strategies work, but we still have to make them work in the 21st century. That's the key. I mean, it's still going to. So that's what I think we should be able to do with that.
Yeah, you're speaking my language there with work, talking about, worker co-ops and workplace democracy is something that I advocate for ad nauseum on the show. I mean, it's truly the reason why I started radical democracy in the first place. That's what the phrasing refers to. Radical democracy is it's what Cornel West refers to when he talks about this sort of economic ideology. It's certainly the ideology I hold and believe in, that it has to be done through labor power. And so I think, given the fact that there's such low, I'm sorry, say what you were saying, RJ. I'm sorry.
I said I think the phenomenon is there's potential right now, and I'm a little bit optimistic because the mentality of workers in America has changed from even 2008. Think about this. In 2008, when there was a Great Recession, when a pretty-faced black man, charming and handsome Obama told you, hey, look, your jobs are, your pay is going to go down, but you're going to keep your benefits, and you're going to be able to support your family. And the economic recovery was almost flatlined for working class people, but it was a J curve for the big corporations. And so back then, people were told to keep your nose down. We'll be fine. We'll take care of you. I mean, the UAW and the United Auto Worker Union, I'm from the Midwest. I know about that. Ford, Chrysler, GM, they were fighting their workers every day, strikes every day to try to increase their wages. And so the reason I bring that up is the mentality has changed in 2020. You see now people, whether it's through Twitter, whether it's through social media, you see people are saying, hey, I'm not doing that same stuff anymore. And what we're seeing now is people are getting smart. The best way to increase your wages without the government coming in is to withhold your labor. And so now what people are doing is that for these fast food joints, for these different type of cooking places, manufacturing workers, even trade skills are getting bigger because it takes engineers to design and build, but you need some trade skill workers to maintenance that shit. And if they go on strike, we are fucked. So they're getting smart enough to say, hey, if we withhold our labor, now all these big corporations, $15, $16, $17, $7.50, $18. So the price is going up. It's like the same phenomenon with Wall Street bets. Wall Street bets, regular working class people, is of course a spectrum in terms of how much money you have. Let's be real. They invested money in the stock market. They were going after against these hedge fund managers who were basically betting against stocks. And they said, okay, if you're betting that AMC, all these different Nokia, all these different types of stocks are going down because of the pandemic, we're going to bet that they will pass and not fail. Hedge fund managers lost billions of dollars in one day. So what did they do? They shut down the casino. And then they claimed, Russia, they're messing with the integrity of our stock market. But all of us know what happened in 2008, in which with the housing crisis, with the big banks, Wall Street, getting our tax money to free themselves. So workers in America are like, our parents aren't necessarily right about keeping the nose to the grindstone. Fuck that. I'm going to actually withhold my labor, get my money, and get my benefits and support myself. So that's something I'm extremely optimistic with, especially with Amazon Bessemer Union Drive. I think an organization that works with making sure that the union election integrity is fine, they came out with reports saying that Amazon was forcing USPS to have certain drop boxes in air, which is incredibly fucking illegal. But we all know in America, laws are only as powerful as they are enforced, meaning that if the government doesn't enforce it, it's not a law. And so I think those are two phenomenons I'm extremely optimistic for.
Yeah, I feel like watching right now this craze going around online of the workers that are just like putting the signs up on the door like, bump this, we left because they're paying us starvation wages. It just warms my heart. And it feels like the conversation's really, really turning between that. You look at, I know McDonald's is McDonald's workers are going to strike on the 19th, it looks like. So it's
tomorrow.
just tomorrow. Yeah. So it's great. You love to see it.
Yeah.
And just to add to a point to this is the exact same kind of cultural phenomenon that happened even with the civil rights movement. See, what they did in the 60s is they said, look, it's apparent that regular apolitical white people couldn't really understand our pain. So what do? We go to the places they commune. They did sit-ins in diners. They saw the racist people pour, of course it's an extreme, but I'm making a great parallel. They pour drinks, food, call them N-word and stuff. So then apolitical people start thinking, that's not right. And so now when you have these workers who go on strike and write signs in front of the door saying, I cannot literally survive off of this wage. If you support me, if you like the food I'm cooking for your ass, you need to stand in solidarity with me. So now apolitical people really who don't have that type of connection with the working class, it clicks. They're like, wait a minute, this is kind of fucked up. So now that's when you're really starting to get somewhere. So that's why it's important for us leftists. Hey, let's make sure we can handle ourselves. But then once we start getting that ball rolling and get people coming in, then we should be straight. So that's what I'm about.
It feels like it piggybacks off the pandemic too. I mean, if the Democratic Party is not going to use what just happened with the pandemic to their benefit, the workers definitely will, because you can't go from calling everyone heroes and essential workers, you know, when you were all comfortably quarantining in your house and they're out there making your food and delivering it, and then next week tell those people, yeah, no, we're still not going to pay you so you can live. Like it's not like people finally saw who really is essential and runs the country, and I feel like that too is, you know, it put a little fire in their bellies.
Yeah, and we need to stand in solidarity too with I would say the food delivery drivers, those who work for Uber Eats, those who work for what's the one, DoorDash. And the reason why is some states, what they're doing is they're writing in their, like California did it in their fucking state constitution, labeling their workers as only contractors so they can stifle their wages, won't be liable for their insurance. So think about it. You're working for a company. You have to literally get no compensation for your insurance, and you pay all out of pocket, while basically DoorDash and these Uber Eats companies, they take all the money off of the top. So you're providing all the labor, doing all the hard work, and they're just taking it from the top, which I think is wrong. And the problem is they're going to the politicians in those states, rewriting the Constitution to be better in their favor. And that's something we have to fucking stop. I don't know how to do it. I'm just bringing that to light because that's something that I think is pretty messed up.
Yeah.
I want to get into this because this, number one, this is one of my favorite conversations to have, and I absolutely love this. Fuck the corporations. Now, one thing I want to say is anybody who's watching this right now, and I want you to listen to me very closely, coming closer. Anytime you see a company say, oh, we're going to give you a hiring bonus for you to come work for us, don't fall for that bullshit. Do not fall for it. You know why? Because number one, there are stipulations tied to that. Because they're going to say, oh, well, it's going to be paid out in little increments over this amount of time or blah, blah, blah. And they're not going to give you a living wage, and you're still going to be stuck in the same position that you were before. So don't listen to them. Number two, I am so excited, just like all my colleagues here, that people are now realizing that they are getting screwed by these corporations. And the thing is that because they realize this and now they're saying, oh no, screw this, I'm going to put a sign on the door and I'm leaving, then guess what? That also means that consumer who was going to go to that place can't consume, which means that they're going to be losing even more money further, which also inconveniences the consumer. So the consumer says, just pay them a living wage so I can get my McMuffin, damn it. And guess what? They pay us a living wage and they get their McMuffin.
Yeah.
So the thing is that, I mean, even if it's for cynical reasons, if somebody is like, just pay them a living wage so I can get my shit, then great. Because even the cynical ones will be behind us.
Yeah.
And so
I'll take it any way I can get it.
Exactly. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like, you got to make things uncomfortable for the people that aren't paying attention, or else, you know, that's why whenever they talk about, oh, they're shutting down the streets and they're disrupting, and, you know, I'm like,
never
great,
be
that's
afraid
exactly what you have
to make it uncomfortable, because you know what else is uncomfortable? Not providing for your family, not being able to make rent, not being able to pay your medical bills. That's real freaking uncomfortable. Not knowing how you're going to pay what you got to pay is real uncomfortable. It's time that these other people above us start feeling uncomfortable like we are.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, like, Do you? So I agree on the point. Everything that you said there, JB, especially the fact that with the signing bonus, with these signing bonuses, they're one-time payments. What they're essentially telling you is we're going to give you a temporary, short-term raise at best, and we're going to take that back away from you, because like you said, it's not even like they're giving it to you up front all the time. Sometimes they're distributing it over time, which is just essentially, we're going to give you a few weeks of here's a couple extra dollars, and let's be clear, whatever they're giving you is still less than what you are going to produce for them ultimately. Otherwise, it does not, that there is no incentive for the capitalist to give you the job. If you are not going to produce more in your time there at the job than what they're going to give you back in wages, then that is not a deal that any capitalist is going to take. They're going to either break even or make no money, which means no money for them. There's no reason for a capitalist to do that. And that's why I think that, RJ's point about workplace democracy is such an important one, because without that step, without taking away, we have to rid ourselves of this capitalist class. And the only way to do it is by not making more capitalists. We got to start to build structures where we're not, capitalism is defined, by economists that matter at this point as any, an economic system defined by the employer-employee relationship. This idea that we got to go to work and we got to submit ourselves over, do this, essentially what is wage slavery. We went from master slave to employer-employee, and we let one small handful of people dominate over our lives in such, intimate ways, where this is where the majority of us spend the majority of the waking hours of our lives, is at the workplace, or getting ready for work, or getting home from work, and having to do all the unpacking and just mental exhaustion that comes with that. And so it's I think it's a beautiful thing that we're seeing people start to have. And I think that what you're talking about there, which I'll say, is people are having a sort of awakening of class consciousness, right? Like it's like they're realizing, these corporations are the ones fucking us over, because a lot of people like there's this game that they right wing tries to play, where they're like, well, it's just anything that goes wrong they just blame on the government, and the idea that it's the market isn't free enough. There's this sort of free market fundamentalism where it's just like, if the market were just freer and we had no government regulation whatsoever, things would be far better. And we've seen how that plays out in things like basic housing, food regulations, things like, basic things. I don't believe every regulation is right. I don't believe that the state is some ultimate good or good entity. I just think that they both can fuck you over equally, depending on, it's just two different types of employers. One is a public employer, one's a private employer, but they, the same structures, are in place in there, where you show up. We saw what happened under Trump, where they essentially refused to sign the contract for all those public employees, and the airlines had to shut down, and they weren't paying any. That's your employer, and your employer, even if it's the state, can completely fuck you over as well. And so I think to RJ's point is a crucial one about workplace democracy. It's something that we that we advocate for here. We're certainly we structured our business structure as a democracy, and we walking the walk and not just talking the talk. Just to sort of tie that to what we were talking about with the Fred Hampton Leftists, have y'all spoken about that sort of structure and what y'all intend to do with the structure of Fred Hampton Leftists? Do you operate it democratically? Do you believe in trying to build some sort of collective or cooperative structure there for your media organization?
Oh yeah, I can actually speak on that. So we're 100% democratic. All of us, we literally 100% democratic that it takes a lot of time to actually get some stuff done sometimes. So we really want to make sure that everyone really, their voice is heard, and we really want to come to really a general consensus, so that when we do stuff, whether it's behind the scenes or whether it's like having guests on or stuff, yada yada, that no one is really left out, and no one is really make sure that everyone has a say. And I think one of your guests mentioned about worker co-ops. We'll definitely work on that as well. But really right now, we're really 100% democratic.
Okay, that's beautiful. Yep. I mean, it has to start somewhere, and so I think that's great. Now, you were saying, RJ, about the trade unions, and you also mentioned that they're sort of they're at about what did you say participation rate? Is it like 7% at this point for
I think it's 13%.
13%. At its peak, I think it was over 30%. I'm pretty sure it was over 30% at its peak. I think that was in the 40s, 50s. It peaked. like you said, during the FDR years, we really had strong unions, and that was what, as you know, James mentioned, that it allowed these, that was the real movement that was pushing policy to the left in this country. So given the sort of abysmal participation rate right now within unions, do you think, what do you say about that? Do you think that we can still, is there enough labor power there within our unions? Do we need to, is the work in organizing and supporting unions in building that up first? How do you think or do we just, is it, for instance, in the teacher strikes that happened, some of those were, I think, what they call like wildcat strikes, where it's not necessarily, the union didn't necessarily agree to it, even if they are, they have unions there. What do you think we have to do to sort of build back up? How do we get union power where it needs to be? And how do we get labor power sort of in a place where it needs to be, so that we can actually push that, push effectively?
So right now, unions nationally are pretty much struggling. They don't really have that type of broad coalition to actually wield power federally. But I am seeing promising things citywide and statewide. And so that's really how you start a left-wing movement. You have to start citywide and statewide. And you mentioned too about the teacher strikes with wildcats. Those are beneficial, because at times we know that union bosses and these different organizations, like especially UAW, a lot of them are ex Ford, Chrysler, GM people who have a grievance against the big three and then jump to the union and fuck over the workers. So wildcats in general, they put a check on the union. Like the workers are saying, okay, you are upholding to us, so you need to make sure you get in that room and talk to the corporation on our behalf. So wildcats themselves, really, it's like a mini strike inside of a union. So I do think that is a good thing to really not only push for what you want, but also make sure that your union has your back. And I think to get to the solution part, I really don't know currently how we can actually make it back up, because it has been on decline for such a long time, since really the 50s. But what I can say is I'm really seeing a lot of promise right now with, like I mentioned earlier, about people awakening and being more class conscious. But I'm really struggling with what strategies we can use to transform that newfound energy into a union. Because if you look at the fallout of the Amazon Bessemer Union Drive, the propaganda is so thick, and especially with the social media and ways of regular email, whether it's TV, like it's very hard to break through that propaganda. So even
let's just be real too. Like Amazon, their employer, like they control half of the internet. Like Amazon Web Services, I built a web, like it runs on Amazon Web Service. Like they control a lot of the sort of channels of information as well. So just to that point there. So So what were you saying about the the propaganda?
So I was saying, it's like the propaganda is so thick. So like even with the Amazon Bessemer Union Drive that happened, even regular people who have simple jobs, simple means, and just want to take care of themselves, those who they love and their family, they seriously believed that if they advocated for a union, and to be clear, because of the propaganda that Amazon put upon them, that it wouldn't be beneficial to their own class needs. And so I think that is going to be really hard, because the difference between 2020 or 2021 now and the 1940s and 50s is that social media and the internet has really connected everyone together in a good way, but also in a bad way, because now corporate America is finding a way to really propagandize everyone. So like in the 40s and 50s, when you reach a person about class consciousness, they'll look at you kind of funny, but they'll listen to you. And since you got to them first, they'll get back with you. And then if the corporate America comes to you, it's hard for them to break away from that mold. But the problem we see now is, like, for instance, like look at Michael Bloomberg. He ran for president in 2020. He flooded YouTube with like Mike will get it done ads for like ever, and he went from 0% to 20% in 2 weeks on the stage. Like that's how powerful social media is. I mean, look at Joe Biden. He had zero cash during the primary, zero campaign offices in California and many of the swing state and primary states, and all he had to do was go on CNN and MSNBC, and he creamed. And also, too, they cheated. Democratic Party cheated, too. But I'm just saying, specifically in this scenario, that mainstream media plays a huge effect, especially in how they use propaganda for working class people. And so to finally wrap this thing together, I'm not sure what solution could be put in place, but I am welcome to have anyone come and talk to me about what strategies we could use in the future to really de-propagandize people and make sure we keep this class consciousness alive.
Yeah, and I think that the work that what's being done, the Fred Hampton Leftists in this sort of building up of this new left media, is including Black left media, Latino folks, indigenous, trans, gay, just everybody, not just American folks from all over the world, finally starting to have a means and an understanding and starting to do the work of the education. That's what somebody I often cite Fred Hampton as well. One of my favorite like clips of him is him talking about why education is so important, right? He's like, no, somebody's trying to talk to him about developing a credit union. He's saying, no, man, you need everything we do, we need education. Education is critical, because otherwise, if you don't have education, before long, you'll build up these institutions, build up these structures, and ultimately they'll just turn over into the same sort of capitalist structures, but under a sort of Black capitalism or rainbow capitalism. And so in order to avoid that, we need to educate folks. We need to have a media that is not beholden to corporate donors and advertisers. And so I really do, genuinely believe that the work that New Left media is doing, and we've seen, even there's for folks that we I used to listen to that I considered and consider progressive, but they're not anti-capitalist. TYT, the Young Turks, is like they are still a capitalist institution. And so at the end of the day, as long as you are if you believe in capitalism and you support it, as much as you might agree with me on a whole host of issues, at the end of the day, you end up just feeding people into the same sort of system and upholding and perpetuating that system. So I think that doing what's being done here, what the Fred Hampton Leftists are doing with developing this new media and doing it in a way that it's, I really do see this as, when TYT started, it was Jank and one other person, and they were like, on some, shitty like camera from 300 years ago, and it was just like in their house, and now look at what TYT has ascended to. And I just think that it could be Fred Hampton Leftists next taking on that role. And so I think that building into your structures things like democracy and understanding that and having that sort of consciousness and that sort of ideology, I do think that matters, and that is that development of a new media in that format is what is going to allow us to do the work to educate, to bring people the information that they need, and to try to avoid this happening again to another generation. And so, I think that I definitely think that there's a a role for all of us to play in that. So if we're already at an hour, I'm going to try. I want to cover a couple more things. So maybe we can wrap back around to this conversation at the end there. But one thing that I wanted to talk about, just because I think that this is sort of a glaring thing, and everybody's we've all been impacted by the pandemic, COVID-19, the lockdowns. One group that has been, we of course know the disproportionate effect that it's an impact that it's had on Black people specifically. We know that typically happens. It's the strongest determinant is class, but under class issues, you have a disproportionate amount of Black people under that because of racism. In this country, and the history of racism in this country has kept Black people in that lower class disproportionately. And so we've seen that. We know that Black people have been disproportionately impacted by COVID-19. But the group that's really seen the sort of most significant deaths in mortality from COVID-19 has been our senior citizens. And it's I think 1/3 of all I believe it's 1/3 of all deaths in the country. Nearly 1/3 of U.S. coronavirus deaths. Nearly 1/3 of U.S. coronavirus deaths are linked to nursing homes specifically. And at 95% of the deaths of COVID-19 this was the study was done in October when they did this, so I couldn't find a more recent study where they covered it, but I've seen similar trends. And at that point, before the vaccinations rollout started happening, 95% of Americans that died from COVID-19 were over the age of 50. Over the age of 50, 50. So 95% of them, 80% of them were over the age of 65. So we have this group that is has been really damaged by COVID, and they're particularly they're particularly vulnerable to the virus, but they also are relying on fixed incomes, living in these sort of nursing homes where they're not being properly cared for, not being properly maintained, which added to their risk. And if we should all be so lucky, we're all going to be senior citizens someday. It's in being a senior citizen, it typically means you did your thing, right? You helped out, you did as much as you could, you gave all your labor over to society. It's like, all right, you get the job done. We in a dignified a society as wealthy as ours, you would think that our elderly, our senior citizens would be some of the best taking care of people, because those are the people that took care of us when we were all kids. This is the whole generation that took care of us. So why does it seem like we're so quick to we're okay treating that group of senior citizens so poorly in this country? And what do you think that we can do to actually provide a dignified retirement for our senior citizens? James, do you want to start out with this one?
The answer to why we treat them the way that we're treating them now is basically capitalism. I mean, if you think about, like, for instance, those of us, and I am one of them, who are either elderly or disabled, you think about how much we get in, Social Security retirement or Social Security disability, right? And so with Social Security retirement or disability, it's basically at starvation income. And then on top of it, they view you as, since you no longer can produce, therefore you have no value. So capitalism is a type of system that does not see a human for what they are. They don't see human value. They only see the value of what you can produce. That being said, people who are kids don't matter. This is one of the reasons why we have to make up child labor laws, because they want kids to work. This is one of the reasons why they treat our elderly and disabled people like shit, because they don't see them as somebody that can produce value. And so they don't see that they have, human value. And so this is some of the things that's been going on within this country. And like, for instance, if you take the average person who gets Social Security retirement or disability, and you work it out to 40 hours per week, it ranges from about $5 to maybe $6, maybe $7 an hour. That's it. And then if they were to get married, then they would cut your benefits in half because you're getting married. So to them, you don't matter. So, number one of the things I think that should be done is, number one, we should have an expansion of Social Security. If anything, I mean, if we can have a Social Security for all, that'd be great. But in the meantime, if we can expand Social Security so that grandma and grandpa, or your cousin who may have a disability, they won't have to suffer in this system and potentially either starve or, have their lights cut off or what have you. So the only other thing that I can think of beyond that is a mutual aid program that focuses attention on people who are the most vulnerable. And the mutual aid programs would be a basis, a foundation for what we would like to see, which is a general strike.
Yeah. So, and 2 points to what you said. First, one, I think that it's great, and it's something that I miss out on too much. Kwame always catches me on this and corrects me on it, and that's why I love having Kwame around to make sure he's catching me on these kind of things. Is that I, even as I sometimes leave out like disabled people from the conversation too much, and because if it's not directly around you, and I had a brother who was quadriplegic, but even that is still, if it's not directly in your face, sometimes it's we've done so much to sort of, like you said, devalue these people, dehumanize these people in a way that they don't even become a part of our consciousness, where we stop even thinking about them. And it's so it's so convenient of us to do that, because then we don't have to be concerned with all the pain, the suffering that those people face. And like you talked about increasing Social Security benefits. I agree wholeheartedly there. We've got some Democrats that are willing to cut Social Security benefits. They just gave Neera Tanden a job in the White House after she has been on record coming out against and saying that she would be in favor of putting things like Social Security benefits up for cuts as well. And I think that it's what you said about them devaluing the elderly and the disabled in this country. It rings so true, because one, like you said, to capitalism, they truly don't, in their eyes, hold any value any longer, because they can't produce for the capitalist class any longer, or when they're children, they can't yet produce for them. And that's why we see them lobby against social programs that would help children, and also why we see things like special carve-outs in our economic system. They have special carve-outs for both disabled workers and younger workers, where they say you can pay younger people. There's a minimum wage, and then some states have a youth minimum wage, where you can actually pay younger people a lower minimum wage. And we see a lot of companies, in fact, like we were talking about McDonald's earlier, those fast food companies, they love to use this line about, oh, it's just kids. Those are jobs for kids. Those are teenagers' jobs, right? So we don't have to pay it. You shouldn't have to pay more than $10 an hour. These are just jobs for kids and high school kids. And, they're just going to do, and they use that, and they actually use that type of excuse. And you get some people that are like, okay, not realizing that most of those jobs are actually held by adults, and people are relying on those jobs.
McDonald's is closed from 9 till about 5 o'clock when the kids get out of school, and that's when they reopen. If you didn't know, clearly,
exactly right. Like it's just foolish to even think that way. But in this country, there's a sub minimum wage for disabled people that Kwame taught me about. Again, Kwame taught me about the sub minimum wage for disabled people. I was not aware of this, that you can pay disabled workers as low as $1 an hour in this country, and it is legal to pay that out. And there are companies. We covered a story on this show, Kwame and I did, where a company was caught. One of them is based out of Massachusetts here with us. They were caught, not just paying them $1 an hour, which would have been legal. They were paying them in coupons. In Salvation Army has recently been found to be doing something similar with their workers that are in rehab. They have something they call work therapy, and these are people that are suffering from substance abuse and alcohol abuse, and they make these people that are sick. They force them to do work therapy, which is supposed to somehow therapize people through working 40 hours a week for a capitalist institution that nets 600 it's a $600 million a year is what the Salvation Army netted it off of their that was their revenues for last year. So and they're out here doing slave labor. We see slave labor in our prison system as well. It seems like when they're able to devalue people and dehumanize people in this way, that gives them a free pass to then exploit these people even worse than capitalism already naturally exploits all of us. And so, great points, and just the ability, connecting that to disabled workers as well, I think is so important and something that I too often miss. So thank you for saying that. RJ, do you have anything that you want to add to that? Anything that you see as far as like solutions that we can be working on? Do you believe in the mutual aid, increase of Social Security? Oh, sorry, you're muted, RJ. I got you.
Okay, I'm sorry, I was muted. I did not know I was muted. Okay, so I do want to say that my auntie, I believe about a year ago, she died from COVID-19. She was in a nursing home. These nursing homes, there's some of them do great work. Don't get me wrong. There's going to be some of them that do good, but a lot of them, it's a systemic problem with nursing homes, how they treat really the elderly, and there's a policy notion around this country where if you work hard all your life, you are entitled to certain benefits. Like you have a pension, retirement, health care, that type of stuff. But as leftists, we're like, how about if any person who fucking works in this country, they are entitled to that benefit? So, the half-assed approach, policy-wise, we want to make sure that the elderly still have it, even if as a whole, as leftists, we want everyone to have it. So I do want to preface that. In terms of the solutions to make sure, you guys hear anything in the background? I can fix that.
No. We're good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. In terms of solutions in which we can have to make sure that those who are elderly.
Okay, we're picking up some birds or something in the background, but that's all good. That's all good. It's we got to hear nature.
It's ambiance. I like it.
Yes, it's all good. Yep, we like it.
Okay. In terms of the solutions, me personally, right now, I don't really know. Mostly because if you look at, and I hate bringing up electoral politics again, but it seems like the older generation has become more disinterested in grassroots organizing because, and as they get older, they get more interested in electoral politics. If you look at those who are over the age of 60, they are heavily for the establishment. I think if we have to, and that's our responsibility as younger generation to push those who are older to say, hey, they may not be in your best favor. It's important to push them, because if we get the older generation on our side, it'll not only help us coming behind them, but it helps with their own material interests. So I think we have to get better in terms of how we really educate our parents or our grandparents, because CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, they're going to do their job to make sure the gravy train keeps going and stop what we're doing. And we have to make sure we have to have a certain class conscious and stand together. And there's plenty of good boomers out there that are doing the hard work, because there's only 7% of them in their entire generation that is really putting up that good fight with leftism. But in terms of solutions, I don't really know. I don't really know how federally we can get anything done right now. And the notion too that the only time that really things can happen is under a Democrat. And the problem is the Democrats aren't the same Democrats that they even were in the 60s or even in the 30s in terms of economics. And they're going to get wiped out again. So we have to try again in 8 years. So that's a pattern that corporate America likes. It keeps people engaged. Sheep herds people in the Democratic Party, don't do anything for them, and then gaslight them and tell them, hey, evil Republicans are here, you have to wait. And so I really don't know. I don't really know what to do. If someone can educate me, I definitely appreciate that.
I think one of the things that we've done, unfortunately, was, and Democrats are in many ways, the Democratic Party is responsible for this, is sort of ceding the ground on family values to the Republican Party, and allowing the Republican Party to hold this narrative about having family values. It should have been, that sort of propaganda should have been destroyed a long time ago, just pointing out how Republicans treat families after they, when they're in the world. Look at how, what they do to poor families. They turn around and they say, in the Republican Party, when I say this, obviously, they look at them and they're like, sorry, you're not a corporation, don't give a fuck. And then slowly over time, we've seen the Democratic Party slowly move all the way to that direction, to where they're pretty much indistinguishable at this point. They don't represent, working people. They more and more every day represent, just a different, they've chosen their different sectors of corporate elites, essentially. The Democrats, they like the Silicon Valley crew, and the Republican Party, they like the fossil fuels and the big polluters and the pharma and all those types. But one thing, there was this study done, and it was they were looking at these people in Sardinia. It's an island like off the coast of Italy, and they were looking at this island of Sardinia, and they were noticing that the people that were there were living till like their average age was significantly higher than anywhere else in the world. So they were just like, what is going on in this part of the world right here, where these people are living till well over 100 and comfortably living till 100 plus. What are they doing right over there? And so they studied it, and they controlled on all these different they controlled on things like climate, economics, just every factor that they could control on. They controlled on it, and at the end of the day, what they found was, their conclusion was that what kept these people alive longer than any of us anywhere else in the world was the fact that they said that they were uniquely living amongst generations of their family. But what has gone on, in my view, under capitalism is this constant need for capitalism to isolate us, to always, because capitalists, they want us to each be individual consumers, it seems, so because if we're all individual consumers, then you don't have one fridge for your whole family. You're each off in your own apartments, in your own places, and you all got to buy your own fridge. You all got to buy your own car. You all got to buy, and we all become individual consumers for them, instead of having, being able to sort of have a sense of community and even family, right? And so I think there's an incentive there for under capitalism for them to do things like encourage us. In media, we see it reinforced all the time. Oh, old folks, and they're just crabby old folks, and just like, let's just send them away and send them off. And it's like, I lived in Jamaica I finished high school out in Jamaica. My dad, he's a Rastafarian farmer, and up in the hills of Jamaica. And I mean, my brother is living, he lives with my dad right now. You live with you live with your parents, your grandparents, your kids, your grandkids. They're all living in one house together. And that's what they noticed in Sardinia. Was the one unique thing about this was that they had 4 or 5 generations living together. The elderly were there to take care of the kids. Kids were there to help out with the elderly when they can't lift this heavy thing or whatever has you. And then I think to your point, RJ, it allows us to open up conversation more, right? At a certain point, we all in the US, we have just accepted the idea of like, all right, well, you got to get out of your parents' house, right? You're shamed. Millennials, like, look what they say to millennials. It's like, you're still living at home with your parents and you're 30 years old. Like, what are you doing? You're a loser. And it's like, and you see that.
I can actually speak on that.
Please.
So
yes.
I think the phenomenon back when our parents were our age is they don't understand that the economic benefits and situations back then are completely different from what it is now. But the cultural front, in terms of, hey, after college, get the fuck out of your parents' house, is still the same. So millennials and Gen Z, we're in this phenomenon where we are in tons of student loan debt. The cost of living continues to increase while our pay has not really increased. We'll only increase 7% since really the 80s. And so we can't afford shit. And even if we do get enough money to afford shit, the bank and loan owners are coming after us and taking our money. And so I think that's the problem that we have. And so I think that puts a ton of pressure on really the younger generation to really try to get ahead. Mm-hmm. And I do think that what's getting better right now is that even people in my generation, I'm weird right now. I'm in between millennials and Gen Z. Yeah. So I don't really know like where I fit. So it depends on the situation. But I do think it's a good thing how even Gen Z is like ready to burn this shit down. So I think that's great. And so I think our millennials and even our Gen X comrades, they're really standing with us a lot. In terms of
it's easy to radicalize when you got like $100,000 as student debt hanging over you everywhere you go in this world. It's I mean, at least under like indentured servitude, it was 7 years. Like you were an indentured servant for 7 years and you did your 7 years of work and then you were free, right? Like student debt at this point, like it's never going anywhere. It's just there. It's this permanent thing, this albatross that we carry around our necks everywhere we go. Where I mean, I got 100,000. And it just keeps going up and up. Even when you pay on it, you can't pay. You can't afford to pay more than the interest sometimes. So the principal's never being touched, and it just keeps on stacking up and stacking up. And so I think you're right that we've done this really evil thing where, and this is the sort of a disconnect that happens with, and I'm not going to generalize, say all boomers or anything like that. We know there are, not all boomers, y'all, all right? Hashtag not all boomers, all right? But like, there's a set of them that are like, oh, well, you just got to work harder and, just pull yourself up. We did it, why don't you go ahead? And the reality, like you said, RJ, is that they were not facing the same economics, even though we may have those same cultural issues playing out, the economics haven't changed. I mean,
they could raise a family, they could go to college, buy a car and a house on one person's income back in the day. It was
just to break that down, to give some context. So even during a lot of this big changes happened in Reagan's second term. That's when everyone really got fucked. So if you look at between the early 70s to really the early 80s, that's really our kind of like my parents when they were younger, and even like my grandma, she worked at GM for 30 years, got her pension, retirement, health care. So she's straight. She gets a discount on any car she wants, gives it to her kids, her grandkids. She even helped my dad get a job when he was in college. So that's the type of benefits, connections that you can get back then. And I mean, if you look at it, like you could walk right out and get a better job, house, all that type of stuff, and you have great pay. But if you look at today's context, I don't think you can get a pension anymore. Correct me if I'm wrong. Your retirement's shitty. Your benefits package has been depleted. The pay is shitty. I don't even know if the big three does these like things where like if you work at their place and you buy a car from them, you get a discount. I don't know if the discount has decreased or increased or not. So all these different type of factors and really depletion of benefits for your labor is what's really concerning. And the phenomenon I don't agree with is that the older generations has had these benefits, but they're constantly telling us to keep our head down when we're telling them that our benefits are being depleted. Yeah. So it really comes across as selfish at times. And it's like, you got to stand in solidarity with us because we're telling you about what's going on and what's happening. And it kind of comes off as elitist. And so that's what I believe is kind of wrong with this. And it really, I think that one of the biggest divides right now in America is based on really age. And it's not, and if you're not one of them, I'm not talking about you, so don't cancel me. So, but I think that's one of the big ones that's happening right now because the excessive pandering towards really the old generation by Joe Biden, the Democrats, and the Republicans has really split us apart, even if we are on the same class front. So that's just my opinion.
Yeah, and I think it's smart of them as, capitalists to do things like that for the capitalist class, for the ruling class to do that because, older people vote. Like they vote, they go out there and they vote religiously. And so if you can get that division there, I mean, they try to divide us up. I love that Bernie speech that he gave a while back when he talked about he was talking to a bunch of high school kids and it was like on C-SPAN and just like from like 10 years ago. He's just like, if you're the Republican Party, and I think you can, say it applies to the Democratic Party now, if you're the Republican Party or the Democratic Party, and you have a set of bad policies that you want to, that you believe in, you can't go campaign on those bad policies. So what do? You try to divide people up along all these arbitrary lines, men versus women, gay versus straight, cis versus trans, black versus white, Islamic versus Christian, old versus young, and you try to divide people up along as many of these arbitrary lines as possible. And then when we're all divided up, divide and conquer, essentially, divide and rule, right? They divide us up and then they can continue to keep conquering and ruling over us. And so I think your point is absolutely spot on that there is a division there. I think the division is intentional and it is part of the work that we have to do to sort of, build solidarity, not just across, across all these other identities, but as well recognizing that age is a major one and that, even though we all, it's this fluid thing that's always changing, but we're all going to get there someday. We've all been young, we've all been older, and we should be able to find solidarity around that. And so we got to, we got to do more of that work. I think I agree.
I think there's no surprise that have seen that slew over the last couple of years of millennials have killed this, millennials have killed, the supermarket, millennials have killed that. And it's not lost on me that for that boomer generation, a lot of what they try to target them with is nostalgia. We're gonna take it back to how it was during the good old times during your time.
Build back better. And, we're gonna build back better.
But you got to hate those millennials because they're the ones killing everything that you love. Everything you remember, Old Country Buffet. It's their fault that that's going away. Remember Applebee's? It's them who killed it.
And I think that it's not lost on me either that then a bunch of young people then turned around and were like, all right, well, we gonna literally kill y'all asses with this COVID, and we literally just let a whole bunch of motherfuckers die out and didn't we should have been out in the streets and I think that, and something that maybe we didn't get a chance to touch on enough because I think that we all seem to be in agreement on this is the idea of a general strike, right? And that we need to start to get real about a general strike in this country, because when we talk about labor power, to me it's like even if we can't find it, I don't know that we can wait long enough to build back the unions, but maybe something we can do to start to move in that direction, I think, is to actually enact and perform a general strike and re-energize people. I don't think one's happened in this country. I don't know. Maybe RJ would know better, like when the last general strike we had. But it's like it was not in my lifetime. I know for sure. It's like we're talking back like well over 50 years ago since the last time the U.S. has had a general strike. It's so far out of it's just been erased from our history almost entirely. So I think that's something that we got to do more. Shout out to the folks in India that were went on that massive labor strike and fought so hard. They're doing it in Palestinians are doing it right now. Going on a general strike in the face of literally a genocide happening against them, ethnic cleansing, and they see that as their best move that they can make, the real sort of their last bastion of power. And so I wholeheartedly agree on the idea of we need a general strike. I mean, we need a general strike now.
They did in Colombia too.
They did in Colombia. I mean, they had those amazing protests that they were going on. I don't think it counted as a general strike, but they were doing those protests in Chile where they were out there every single night, and it was young folks, it was older folks. It was really it was a youth-led movement. The older folks were out there too, but it was a youth-led movement. And Chile is kind of where neoliberalism really took its roots, and that's where sort of the neoliberal project started. Was in Chile, as far as I understand it. So I think that this is a power that we do have, and I think that something that we're going to need to think about in left media, I believe, is how do we make sure that we also can contribute to that labor power? If we develop up in a way that we are still a bunch of sort of small isolated institutions, and we're all sort of. You got a thought on that?
Yeah,
okay?
So I think one thing you're missing in your rant is that, yes, we as leftists, we want to move even apolitical people or even left-leaning people to push for a general strike. But the issue I think you're missing is mutual aid. People aren't going to be willing to do something like that and take a risk if their healthcare isn't covered. If you quit your job, so is your healthcare. It's fucking gone. And Cobra is going to kick your ass. So we need to make sure we have mutual aid programs to make sure people have healthcare. Also, student loan debt. As soon as you quit your job, I believe if you get a job the first time, you get 6 months forbearance, and then it starts kicking in. But even if you quit your job after that forbearance, then the student loan starts kicking your ass. So we need to actually build up mutual aid connections and programs, not just in some cities, but some states. Really a great national one as well, and make sure it's democratically controlled, because we don't want a power vacuum to create and someone be in charge of all the type of funds. And if we can do that, then we can be able to push for a general strike more effectively. Because once people's material conditions are changed, that's when people really start being on board. It's kind of like what our Fred Hampton Leftist co-host Rome is doing around the country. He's feeding the homeless, he's feeding the poor, feeding the homeless, clothing the poor as well. And then he talks about communism and leftism, because once people's material conditions change, then they can go to it. Because what are they looking at? They're looking at the capitalistic system, the machine not helping them. But if you come and help them first and then convert them, then you have an ally for life. So I think that's something that we could do first before we really put all our eggs in the basket of a general strike.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And something that I agree with. You got to have, we do absolutely need to start to build up those sort of, institutional supports for workers that are striking, because we need to be able to make sure that we don't let these companies sort of use the threat of destitution against these people. Of course, some of us are, some folks more privileged than others, where, some folks are gonna, get fired and lose their health care if we don't strike, and so we also need to look out for that and make sure if you can support, if you do have enough, if you are in a position where you're not going to be absolutely destitute, I do think that we have to be willing to take a risk, because the other risk is that we keep on telling folks these threats are existential, meaning if we do not face these things and fix them, we will cease to exist. And so we won't have healthcare or anything nice and benefits like that. When that happens, we might not have a livable planet, in 100 years from now. And so I do think that it's a twofold thing. We got to start to work on mutual aid and developing that mutual aid. but I think that there are privileged folks, folks that I used to be in that group of people when I was a software engineer, and I was making enough money, and I had enough, set aside where it's like, if we go on strike tomorrow, I'm out there with y'all. And I think that more people, especially in that sort of, when you're if you're in that position where you're not going to be destitute, and you have especially folks that are in unions and have that sort of organization around them, we got to start to develop more mutual aid networks. And I think that's a conversation I'd love to have y'all back on to discuss more. How do we go about that? How can we start building that? Maybe we can talk about some specific mutual aid networks that you might know of that we should start to, focus our attention towards. So I think that that's a great point, in something that we definitely have to start to work on, because we got to make sure that we're looking out for the people that are literally, because when people go on strike, they're not just fighting for themselves, they're fighting for all of us. And so we got to fight for them too. We got to support them too, in whatever way we can. So instead of routing all our damn money to these politicians, like, that turn around and they're not able to do things effectively. Like, look, I think AOC took in by herself, I think something like $23 million in the last election cycle. $23 million, that was grassroots money right there. Like, that was money we put in. We all got together. I was one of them. I've donated countless dollars to her, just had like a $50 a month donation set up, and just, Bernie Sanders, all these people. And we pour a lot of money on the sort of, on the left, not just the left, but, and liberals and, folks who support the Democratic Party, but even on the left. I mean, people that I consider left were encouraging things like, donate to this politician, donate to that politician. And I used to do the same thing and believe that was possible. But more and more with, with everything that we talked about, in the failures that we've seen, or the successes, depending on how you look at it from their perspective, we've gotten to a point now where I don't believe that is an effective use of our money and our funding. And so I think that we got to find a way to start to encourage folks to start to reroute their funds. We got to think about it, make sure that we're doing this democratically, and encouraging people to build up, to do this within democratic institutions, so that we don't end up, losing sight of it and allowing some sort of like hierarchical thing, and somebody at the top gets, co-opted or corrupted into their system, and then ultimately serves their purpose. But we got to start to route our money, this money that we've been pouring into electoral politics, and reroute that shit to mutual funds, mutual aid, not mutual funds. I think that's like a banking term, mutual aid networks. And so I would love to have y'all back on. We're at an hour and a half, and we gotta, we gotta cut time. I could sit here and talk to y'all all freaking night about this, honestly. So we'll wrap things up. Do y'all have any last thoughts before we go? Make sure, where can folks find you? Well, I'll tell you where you can find them. They're at the Fred Hampton Leftists, goddamn it, and the link is in the description box below. So please, if you're watching this right now, just do me a favor and click that link. You might want to right click it and open in a new tab, so you don't leave us right in this moment. But open up that link, click that link, go support the Fred Hampton Leftists. Definitely subscribe to their show. Like, y'all are missing out if you're not subscribed. Like James and RJ said already, they had Cornel West on earlier. I've seen James had on Kshama Sawant. I've seen RJ talking to EQ. RJ, you're muted right now. But I saw RJ talking to EQ about, anarchy, and I was, I'm learning, because I'm left, but I'm not that left yet. I'm working on it. And so they're doing this really important work of, building up a political education, and also, and also doing it in a way that still, it doesn't lose sight of the some of the most vulnerable people inside of this colonized society we live in America here. Black folks. You're making sure that they don't get left out of the conversation. And so please subscribe to the Fred Hampton Leftists. Check out RJ's show, Revolutionary Jargon, the JB show. And again, you can also support them over on Patreon. The link to the Fred Hampton Patreon is in the description box below. From what I've heard today, I hope that money is, what you do with that money is determined in a democratic way, I believe, based on our conversations today. And that's what I support. I wholeheartedly support it. I don't think I'm a member right now, but don't worry. I'll drop y'all. I got y'all. Like, I'll be signing up. I'll make sure that I support. I walk the walk. I don't just talk the talk. So we'll definitely be supporting as well. So please, we encourage you, please support what they're doing over there at Fred Hampton Leftists. Is there anywhere else that they can find? Oh, I also got y'all Twitter links in the description box below too. These dudes are prolific on Twitter, y'all. I love y'all takes. Y'all got a great analysis. I don't know how the fuck you can break it down so well in 280 characters, but you do the damn thing. And so check out you're just missing out if you are not following these two on Twitter. You're missing out on some real great takes.
Do you guys have anything coming up you want to plug real quick that people should be looking out for? Anything you're excited about?
Yeah, so on my show for Revolutionary Jargon, I'm doing a pre-taped show. It'll be released Friday. I'm going to do it with Jabari Morris. He is the co-editor-in-chief of Real Progressives USA. And so we'll be talking about a universal public banking system, which is something that I don't know anything about. I'm going to do a little bit of my own research, and we're going to have a great conversation about that. And the reason why this is going to be brought up is because look at what's happening with Bitcoin. Look at the United States Federal Reserve and the Treasury completely looting and spending so much money, and it's really hurting the average American worker because the rise of inflation makes the U.S. dollar weaker, and it really makes it harder for working class people to buy goods they need to survive. So what type of banking system that working class people can use to make sure that their funds are protected and they get the most bang for their buck to provide goods and services for themselves and for their community. So that's something we're going to be talking about.
That's awesome. I'm looking forward to that now. I'll definitely be checking that out. Yeah. What about you, James? Anything coming up, or where do you where can folks find you? Yep.
Of course. I will be interviewing this Sunday. I'll be interviewing Richard Meadhurst. We'll be having him on, and one of the things that I want to talk to him about is the situation that's going on with the Palestinian people and the illegal occupation. Also, we're going to touch on some foreign policy issues, the issues that's going on with Syria and the proxy war that's being done in Yemen. I would like to discuss a few more foreign policy things. And one of the reasons why is because people who are oppressed anywhere is, basically people who are oppressed everywhere, and we stand with them. And there is a link with Black people, especially, and what the Palestinians are going through, because they're basically going through what a lot of what we went through in this country. So I want to actually be able to not only show solidarity, but show people within this nation, especially those of us in the Black community, that our causes and our needs are linked. And so it's important for us to support the people, especially the Palestinians abroad.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Well said. And I've seen some dumbass, Black liberals on the hellscape that is Twitter sometimes, telling us that we shouldn't support Palestinians because they weren't, protesting for, BLM, even though they were, and they have been doing that work.
There's literally a George Floyd mural in Palestine right now. So let me tell you this. They can shut the fuck up, because there is they actually were for George Floyd in Palestine. So they need to sit down. Have several seats.
Absolutely. These people, if they're not being paid by the CIA, they should stop doing that free labor and get them a check at least, if y'all gonna do the CIA's work anyways. Trying to divide up the Black liberation struggles wherever we need a internationalist cosmopolitan approach to this, where we recognize ourselves as one global community. And I think it's so important that you add that we're adding and contributing Black voices on the left, so that people can't run this line anymore of trying to create that Black monolith and pretend as if this is what's representative of Black Americans. There is a strong and burgeoning Black left, and I think that y'all are doing great work to help support that. So thank you so much for coming on today. Y'all are absolutely welcome to come back on anytime, and I would love to have y'all back on again soon. I got a million things that I could talk to y'all about, and hopefully we will get to that. So would love to have RJ on too, to talk some history, and we could do some we got to educate all of our audiences and make sure that they're getting that aspect of it. So thank you so much for everything y'all are doing. Keep fighting the good fight, keep doing that good work, y'all, and we will hope to see y'all soon. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us, and go check them out and support. Thank y'all so much. All right.
Thank you.
All right, y'all. All right, that was great, man. I love that. They're awesome, y'all. So I really appreciate that. I'm glad that we were able to do that and get the two of them on there together. That was really just Powerful stuff. A lot of great points. I want to, we'll cut this up. We'll clip this up for folks that aren't able to watch it live, so that we can get some of those clips in. And I think, and again, we will look to have both Jaybefaunt and RJ on again soon, because I could keep this conversation going for a long, long time. But yeah, any last thoughts, Kwame, before we sign off here?
No.
All right.
They said what needed to be said. How do we top that, right?
Exactly. There's nothing to be added, right? So thank you to everyone for joining us today. Please do us a favor and hit the like button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed. Hit all of those links in the description box. Check out Jaybefaunt and RJ on Twitter, at Comrade Curls, at Jaybefaunt on Twitter, and sign up, follow them, check out what they're doing over at Fred Hampton Leftists. We need more Black leftists, participating in this discourse and doing this work. And so just shout out to everything that they're doing over there. Nothing but the utmost support for them, and all of the folks over there at the Fred Hampton Leftists. Hopefully we'll have on more of the Fred Hampton Leftists, and we can do, we'll do a lot of, we hope to do a lot of cooperating with those folks, because they're doing really great work over there. So shout out to everyone. Thank you to all of our supporters. And thank you to everyone who showed up today and engaged in those comments. I wish we had some more time, but we're up against time today, so we can't get to all the comments, but we definitely were seeing the comments as they rolled in. So thanks to everyone. Shout out to our super producer, Tammy, in the background on the 1s and 2s. And yeah, just thank you all for being here.